Everything that hurt had a purpose. In a hidden valley nestled among blue mountains lived a young man named Kaito. For years, he felt life kept striking him again and again. He lost his parents as a child, was rejected by his painting master, and the love he once believed true faded away without explanation. He carried each wound like heavy stones inside an invisible bag. They weighed him down, they hurt, and often, he wondered if all that suffering was nothing more than a senseless punishment. One morning, tired of dragging his sadness, he climbed the hill to the Willow Temple, where the elderly Master Ichiro lived, known for listening more than speaking. Kaito wasn't seeking comfort, only answers. "Master," he said, bowing, "why so much pain?" The old man looked at him without judgment. Then, he simply offered a cup of warm tea and pointed to the rock garden before them. "Look closely, and come back tomorrow with what you have seen." Kaito sat in front of the rock garden for hours. At first glance, all he saw were stones placed on white sand. Some were large, others small. Some smooth, others jagged. But nothing seemed to follow any clear pattern. The sun slowly moved across the sky, casting shadows that changed how the stones related to each other. Kaito began to notice something curious. Although they were separate, together they formed a subtle harmony. The space between them spoke as well. He returned to the temple at dusk. Ichiro waited, calm as ever. "So?" the master asked softly. Kaito hesitated. "At first I saw chaos, then beauty. Each stone seemed painful alone, but together, they made sense." The master nodded gently and said, "The garden doesn't try to please you. It only shows you what's already within." Kaito lowered his gaze, confused, yet something inside him began to stir, like a leaf trembling just before the wind. That night, Kaito barely slept. His mind kept replaying the image of the garden over and over. The stones, seemingly placed at random, seemed to speak to him in a wordless language. He remembered the day he lost his mother. He was only 7. The sound of the wind rustling through the cherry branches in the yard. The silence left after her last breath. Then he thought of his father, who left without goodbye the following winter, leaving him a wooden bowl and a promise he never quite understood. "One day you'll know what pain is for." Now, years later, those words echoed back. Was that garden a reflection of his life? Each stone, a wound? What if the master had brought him there not to explain pain, but to show him that even chaos has its place? The next morning, he returned to the temple with softer eyes. Master Ichiro was waiting, sweeping dry leaves beneath the eaves. "Master," Kaito said, "I think I understand a part of it." "What part?" "That nothing is out of place. That even the things that hurt the most can be part of a larger design. Maybe I don't fully understand yet, but I feel it wasn't in vain." The master set the broom aside, looked at him with calm eyes, and said, "When you accept that you can't control the wind, you begin to learn how to use the sails." Kaito took a deep breath. For the first time, he didn't feel the weight of the stones. He felt that maybe, just maybe, he could start placing them in his own garden. In the days that followed, Kaito began helping around the temple. Master Ichiro never asked him to. The desire to stay and learn in silence simply grew within him. He swept the paths, fetched water from the spring, and meditated at dawn in front of the stone garden. And every morning, without fail, the master placed a new stone in the garden. He said nothing. He gave no explanation. He simply chose a stone from the nearby forest, held it reverently in his hands, and slowly set it down on the sand. Kaito watched the process with fascination. One day, he couldn't hold back his question any longer. "Why do you keep adding stones, master?" Ichiro didn't answer right away. He continued raking the earth, creating delicate ripples around the rocks. "Because the garden isn't finished yet," he finally said. "And how will you know when it is?" Ichiro looked at him with a faint smile. "When my soul no longer aches." Kaito then understood that each new stone was not just a shape, but a memory, an honored scar. The garden was not merely a space for contemplation. It was a mirror of the heart. That night, Kaito picked up a small stone by the river. It had no special color or unique shape, but holding it, he thought of the time he felt betrayed by someone he loved deeply. The pain still lived there, though softer now. He carried it with him. The next day, he placed it in the garden. The master said nothing. He only nodded with his eyes. As the days passed, Kaito began to understand something that had once been invisible to him. Pain doesn't disappear by avoiding it, but by embracing it. Each stone in the garden seemed to resonate with a part of his past. One reminded him of the loneliness he felt as a child. Another, the rejection from his painting master. Yet another evoked that afternoon when, standing in the rain, he waited for someone who never came. But instead of reliving those wounds with bitterness, Kaito started to see them as seeds that had blossomed in unexpected ways. Because of rejection, he had traveled. Because of abandonment, he had learned to care for himself. And because of pain, he was now there, learning from a master he would never have found otherwise. One afternoon, as he placed another small stone, he asked, "Master, does remembering always hurt?" Ichiro looked at him for a long moment before answering, "Only if you still resist understanding what that memory came to teach you. And what if I don't understand its purpose? Then wait. Not everything reveals itself when you want it to. Some truths bloom only when the heart is ready." A deep silence fell. Kaito lowered his head, not in defeat, but in humility. He was learning that understanding is not an act of will, but a gift from life when you stop forcing it. That night, for the first time, he slept without feeling the need to understand it all. It was enough to simply feel. Winter arrived quietly in the valley. The bare cherry branches creaked at dawn, and frost covered the temple steps. Kaito was no longer just a visitor. His routine had blended with the calm of the place. He no longer asked questions. He simply listened. He no longer feared the cold or the silence. He was beginning to feel part of something greater than himself. One morning, while sweeping snow from the garden, he found Master Ichiro sitting in front of the frozen pond, holding a stone. It was different from the others. Black, cracked, with an edge that seemed to have cut more than one heart. He held it silently for a long moment. "This is the stone I refused to place for many years," he finally said. Kaito looked at him quietly. "Why?" "Because it reminded me of the night I abandoned my son. I chose the path of the temple and never went back to find him." Kaito didn't know what to say. In that moment, the master seemed older, more human. "And now I understand that this choice, so harsh and painful, brought me to you and to many others. But above all, it brought me back to myself." With trembling hands, Ichiro placed that stone in the center of the garden. He didn't hide it. He didn't soften it. He left it there, visible like the heart of a story hard to tell. Kaito bowed deeply, not out of respect for the master, but out of reverence for the courage to accept the past without adornment. That day, the garden changed, not because of the stone, but because of the truth it held. The days stretched slowly, as if time itself had learned to walk more gently in that corner of the world. The stone garden, though it might not have seemed so at first glance, had changed. It was no longer just a place for contemplation. It had become a map of the soul. Each stone, a redeemed memory. Each space between them, a meaningful pause. Kaito wandered through it like one who visits an ancient sacred book, not to find answers, but to remember the beauty of the questions. One morning, Ichiro said to him, "It's time for you to return." Kaito looked at him, surprised. "Return? To where?" "To your life," the master replied gently. "You've understood the essentials here. Now you must carry that garden within you." Kaito felt a slight tremor in his chest, not because he didn't want to leave, but because he knew he was no longer the same young man who had arrived burdened with nameless stones. Before leaving, he asked permission to leave one last stone. The master nodded. Kaito chose a small, white, almost smooth stone. He placed it near the edge, where the garden touched the world. It represented his new wound, the wound of leaving, but also his first step toward a life lived with purpose. Ichiro walked him to the temple entrance. There, beneath the old willow, he said, "Everything that hurt had a reason, not to punish you but to shape you, like the river shapes the stone." Kaito closed his eyes, and in that moment, he knew he didn't need to understand everything to feel at peace. Some things are simply felt, and that is enough. Kaito descended the mountain path with slow, deliberate steps, as if each one was weaving a bridge between past and present. He carried no luggage, except for a small gray stone in his pocket. It wasn't for the garden, nor for the master. It was for himself, a tangible memory that everything he had lived through, even the pain, had a purpose. When he arrived at his old village, nothing seemed to have changed. Yet he saw everything differently. The same streets, the same river, the same faces. But now, he could see the beauty in the cracks, in the silences, in the goodbyes he once didn't understand. In time, Kaito opened a small retreat on the outskirts of the village. He didn't call it a temple, nor a garden. It was simply a place where others could come, sit in silence, and perhaps discover that their wounds also had shape, story, and worth. He never saw Master Ichiro again, but every time someone left a stone in his garden, Kaito smiled, because he understood, without words, that they too were healing. And so, stone by stone, pain transformed into understanding, and understanding into compassion, because what hurt the most was also what taught the most.